thinking that it would appear on the list anyway. But you're right, they're not public offer, so they're not going to...
Confusion.
Well, there might not be, depending on how clever we can be and how we design the online arrangement. So I think it's something we definitely work through.
Okay. Well, what about the insurance issue?
Sorry, can you just...
Well, you're going to provide us with some evidence as to how many corporate funds actually still pay fully for the insurance of the members.
Well, they provide fully, or they provide in part, or they provide other support.
Well, it'd be good to get the evidence in the submission from you, Mark, so we can understand the extent of the benefit. Because I guess at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that members are finding their ways to the top and the good performing funds that give them investment performance and features that they attach value to.
Would it be of interest to know that we contribute 21% rather than 9.5%?
It would. I mean, on those, in relation to the sort of features of your fund and what might go onto a dashboard about what people are, when people are making a choice about the sorts of things, the benefits that different people will have and what might go onto the dashboards, they're the kinds of things you might...
I would draw 17% and rather than...
But if that's the sort of thing that you wanted to put into your submission too, about, well, what sort of metrics should be on that dashboard for a fund, a corporate fund that might offer those kinds of benefits, you might want to say these are the kinds of things we'd want included.
So it's kind of interesting because UniSuper didn't raise this as an issue. They know that they've been dealt out of best in show because they're not open offer, but they didn't consider themselves to be dealt out of getting new job entrants because they'll be MySuper authorised.
I'll better talk to Mr. Barrett. I'm sure he's...
No, not the DB.
Well, it'd be interesting.
Okay,
but what about open defined benefit funds? A member has a chance to get into a defined benefit fund once in their life. And
how many open DBs are there in Australia, Mark?
About 6. UniSuper is one, Maritime Super is another. Off the top of my head, a lot of public sector funds.
That's not what I was told by UniSuper last week when I had a meeting with them. But anyway, let's be careful that we don't quote what people are doing when we might have had conflicting evidence from them directly.
But look, you've raised some important issues. I think if you could put a submission to us in terms of your concerns, and I think in principle, you can take away from today, if you've got MySuper authorisation, we're certainly not wanting, the intention of our reforms here is not to count anyone out of the system who's got MySuper authorisation, that people who want to go into any MySuper fund and have that as their default fund shouldn't be excluded from doing so.
And do you want to know my thoughts, if you probably don't, but you want to know my thoughts about what you're proposing?
Sure.
The picking 10 and then reviewing in 4 years is going to be an interesting exercise, and the people who do that exercise will need to be very careful, because funds that go off the top 10 will be vulnerable, and the members who don't move will be vulnerable, because there will be people promoting themselves as on the top 10 and not on the top 10. And the question is whether what dynamic you see for the people who are not interested. Because if a fund significantly loses membership, the remaining members invariably suffer.
So I think we've crafted the system in such a way with the metrics I mentioned before in terms of how the best in show is more open to that group of 19.7 billion out of the 150 billion each year. You'd have to assume an exponential increase in switching rates to move away from that. And we're yet to receive any evidence to suggest that would be the case. So it'd be good to have a think about that in the context of how we...
Never had it before, though. You haven't... I don't... People don't switch very often.
That's right. So that's why what we're proposing doesn't create the level of system instability that some have suggested.
The evidence will reveal itself, I suppose.
I mean, we've done as much as we can to model. We've got some data from APRA about fund flows. We've looked at the percentage of people that would go, and obviously we haven't identified the top 10, but we've had a rough idea about who might be up there, and what we can assume from if the current behaviours persisted, what would be the what would be the flows, and then if we assumed that there was some higher level of switching because we've now got a better identified group of 10 and that there might be more member response to that group of 10, that switching rate, even if it increased quite dramatically from where it is today, we feel that given the flows that we've been able to identify from our transition modelling, that we wouldn't get an unmanageable level of system instability. I think people just forget that it's not just the top 10. It's everyone else that's MySuper authorised would still retain all of their default members and the contributions for those default funds unless those members then switched up to the 10. So unless you get an awful lot of people suddenly engaged and switching, the flows within the system for those default funds, for the MySuper funds overall, other than the tail, which through our elevated MySuper we hope we might move on more quickly, but for that substantive part of the well-performing part of the system, we don't see that there should be such dramatic shifts that there's problems for members of those funds.
So Mark, one final question for you. Our report did identify 2 problems in the system: entrenched underperformance across all segments and unintended multiple accounts.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that ex-Reserve Bank Governor Bernie Fraser said those problems that the PC has identified have been there for yonks, but there's been a hell of a lot of inertia. Why is it the industry hasn't done anything about those 2 problems?
The regulator hasn't enforced the rules. There've been 3 or 4 attempts to merge funds. People who hold the money are resistant to it and find every reason not to. And the regulator hasn't let them get away with it. There was, I think, it's a sign of age, I guess. There was when MySuper was introduced, there was a transition period where all accounts that weren't MySuper accounts had to be transferred to a MySuper account. So that led to every man and his woman and his dog applying for a MySuper licence so that they could transfer them into the MySuper. Now, the regulator has tolerated underperformance at a significant level in retail and indeed in industry funds in the MySuper space without revoking their licences. And they keep changing the rules. That scale didn't work. They've now got something else. And unless they actually enforce the rules, which are very, very fair, you don't hear us complaining about, we try and get the funds together. We like big account balances because it's better. We'd also like the APRA levy to be capped in a different way, but that's for another place. The things that are affecting corporate funds are the fact that we pay a disproportionate APRA levy per member because we're not large enough to fall under the cap. We report quarterly at significant cost of something that doesn't really change much. Anyway.
Okay, thanks. We've covered a lot of ground, Mark. We look forward to getting your post-draft report submission and hopefully we've been able to address some of your concerns.
Well, I hope so. I would like to think that we could still survive because we do better. We bluntly do better. And
okay, thank you.
Can we go off the record for a second?
We're doing a transcript, so we might speak to you later.
Okay, I'd like to just mention something that you mentioned in passing, but it's not appropriate for me to comment publicly.
I'll catch you in a moment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. All righty, folks, we're going to suspend and have a little bit of break so we can get a caffeine hit, which is probably much needed for most. And it's just after 3, so let's aim to resume at 3:15 if we could, please. Thanks.